Now, buddy, we are having first chapter of class 12th in history, that is colonization and the countryside, exploring official archives. So the first question is, why was Jotadar? Jotadar were the rich peasants, a powerful figure in many areas of rural Bengal. So, as I told, that Jotadars were rich peasants in Bengal. They owned big plots of land, sometimes running into thousands of acres of land. And in your village also, you have seen that some of have not a single big of land, and some of them have 500 and 1,000 big of land. It is also condition of some of the parts. So they collected local trade and commerce, including the money lending to business. They had great influence on the local village population. They were regarded more powerful than the Jamidars women. Following are the main reasons, I think. So first, Jotadars controlled trade and commerce, including money lending business at the local levels. In order to weaken the Jamidar, Jotadar would mobilize riots not to pay or delay payments towards land revenue. Jotadar opposed the move of Jamidar to increase the Jama of a village, and the Jotadar lived in the village only, hence they were in the better position to interact with the influence of peasants. And then Jotadar were rich and owned big acres of land under cultivations. Many a times they would buy estates of Jamidar and they would be auctioned due to failures to pay up land and revenue. So now question 2. How did Jamidar manage to retain control over their Jamidari? So answer is the Jamidar were in bad times. They often resorted to various tactics to maintain control on the Jamidari. So Jamidar created fractious sales during actions. Their own men would make highest bid and later refuse to pay up after repeating the exercise for a couple of occasions. The government would be tired and send it back to Jamidar at lesser rates. A part of estate was often transferred to female members of the family, and that part of property could not be taken by the government anymore. Zamindar put hurdles in purchase and occupation of the estate by others by the use of sheer muscle power. Sometimes even peasants under the influence of Zamindar opposed auctionists of estate. Now we have the third question: how did Pahariyas respond to coming of outsider? The Pahariyas lived in the hills of Rajmahal. The British people began to interact with them, and later Santhals began to settle down there. And what was the response? The Pahariyas resisted the settlement of Santhals initially, but had to accommodate them in course of the time. Pahariyas shifted to deeper areas into the hills. They were confined to more barren and rocky areas of the hills in course of time. And the Pahariyas did shifting cultivation. Now shifting cultivation was becoming more and more difficult as proper and stable settlements. As forest began to be cleared, the Pahariyas could not depend on its livelihood, thus lifestyle and the living of Paharia underwent change due to coming of outsiders. Now we have the fourth question: why did the Santhal rebel against British rule? So the answer is pretty simple. In 1932, the Santhal had settled in where? The name is Damik Eco area. The settlements expanded rapidly. Forests were cleared to accommodate them. The company also benefited as it got more and more land revenue. However, the Santhals too got dissatisfied. They rebelled against the British rule. Santhals were not happy with the tax regime of the company. They thought that the land revenue rates are high and exploitative. The Jamidar began to exercise greater control of the areas brought under cultivation by Santhals, and apparently it was a part of the British policy, but Santhals represented that. Moneylenders in the rural area were seen as the villain and agent of company rule by the Santhals, and a moneylender could not auction the land of the Santhal in case of defaulter. All this was not liked by the Santhals. So British took steps to politicate the Santhals later on. A separate district of the Santhal Pargana was carved out and law was enacted to people the Santhals. Then we have the question 5. What explained the anger of Deccan riots against the moneylender? The main reasons for the anger of the riots against moneylender are: first, rural India was having traditional rules that the interest will be always remain in and less than the principal amount. However, in many cases, interest payable was more than the principal itself. In one case, the interest was 2,000 against principal amount of 100. No receipt was paid in case of payment of loan penalty or fully. This opened the scope of manipulation by the moneylender. And Riot complained about forging the document and other fraudulent activity by the moneylenders. So riots believed that the moneylender were insensitive to them and made an arrogant and exploitative thought. Now, chapter 6: why were so many Jamidari auctioned after the permanent settlements? So, many Jamidari were auctioned. First, many believed that the land revenue settlements was the highest site. Moreover, soon after the permanent settlements, the food grain prices declined. The Rajs could not pay up to the land revenue, and hence Jamidari also defaulted. The revenue was to deposit on the time irrespective of harvest cycle. This was another reason for the default of the Jamidar. The power of Jamidar was curbed by the company. They were no longer law and order enforcing agency at local level. Their muscle men were also weakened as a result of Jamidari could not effectively collect taxes at time. Many a time Jodhar and peasants deliberately delayed the land revenue payment. This resulted in default by Jamidar and the auction thereafter. We have the seventh question. In what ways the livelihood of Pahadiyas different from that of Santhal? So Pahadiyas was living on the foothills of the Rajmahal. They lived a life that was very different from the Santhals. Most of the information of their life is based on the reports of the Buchanan, the physician of the East India Company who wandered into the terrain of the Rajmahal. The Pahadian were nomads. They lived in the wandering life. They, however, sometimes shifting cultivation. Another important source of livelihood are forest resources and animals. They extracted mahua and used colonialism as a countryside. Exploring official archives, Pahadia used to look on the outsider with suspicion and even were hostile with them. Santhal were different from them on many counts. Santhal took to agriculture fast and soon got their settled life. They had a better relation with the outsider, including the East India Company. Now we have the question 8. How did the American Civil War affect the life of the riots in India? The American Civil War that began in 1860 had a huge impact on riots of Deccan region in India. Following events explained how the impact took shape. Britain was the country where large cotton mills were operational. So cotton mill depends on the cotton import from North America. When the USA was reeling under civil war, it was naturally very difficult to import cotton from the United States. The cotton mills were forced to look the unrelated supply to cotton import from the US. So India was a good option. The farmers in Deccan were encouraged to grow cotton. One way was the easy access of credit. The moneylender would give credit of 100 rupees for every acre of land. Under cotton cultivation, the farmer benefited out of the demand for cotton, but the real beneficiary were the big farmers and traders. However, things changed as normalcy returned to the US. Now the demand of the cotton in India declined, so decided to easy availability of credit. The riots fell back to old days of penury and rose the rebellion in many ways. So, what were the problems of using the official resource in writing about the history of peasants? Official resources of the company Raj are not regarded as a reliable source of the history, as official records reflects only the company Raj perspective. They did not look at the events of the official different angles. For example, the Deccan Rights Commission was instituted. It was required to find out the land revenue was just or not. Other issues of rights were not undertaken into account. The British people looked down upon the local people, their culture and tradition as lowly. They ended up giving the lowly picture of the peasants, even if without intention of the same. The record of the company Raj was created by the official in such a manner that it suits their master. Thus, evidences were tampered before with. For example, Deccan Rights Commission concluded the riots even angered not by high land revenue and by the moneylender, and thus official sources are not to be read along with their sources need to be vetted before the taken into our stride. We have 10th question. On the outline map of subcontinent, we have to place this. So I think we have ended our discussion on the colonialism and the countryside, exploring official archives. So signing off.